Hello, guys and gals, and this is a reading of, part 7 of our reading of A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent, a book by Marie Brennan. As always, we're going to go over the copyright information, which you can see clearly here on the screen. Clearly says here, all rights reserved, and it's a copyright 2013 by Bryn Noonschwander. And all that information, I'll leave that on the screen for a little while. Anyways, Lady Trent, I'm going to call her that. I don't even know what her name is, to be honest, sorry. Isabella, okay. Isabella, finally convinced her husband, and it seems like she also convinced, Lord, or Earl Hilford to, accompany them both on this, expedition to Vestrana to see some actual dragons or something like that. So, we are going to see how that goes. Either way, he seems to be cool with her going, which is pretty cool. Okay, bookmark down. Okay. Don't go questioning me, Camhurst, unless you want me reconsidering my decision. Make sure she knows what she needs to before we get to Vestrana. Fat lot of use she'll be filling notes if she can't tell a hatchling from a lizard, but I doubt that will be a problem. Lord Hilsford's eyes twinkled at me, so briefly I might have imagined it. We rushed to thank him, but he waved it all off with one hand. My plans are all being turned on their head anyways. What's one more change? What do you mean? Jacob asked. Lord Hilford's good humor was overshadowed by a scowl. A scowl. Politics. The Tsar of Bolskivo has decided against that again that he doesn't like Skrillings, which is a problem when we're dependent on him for iron. But that is neither here nor there. What matters is that the boyar of Zavajak, which is where I captured that albino runt, is a boot-licking court toady who won't do anything the Tsar might frown at. So I've been refused permission to return to Zavajak next year. Oh no, I said dismayed. Will the expedition be delayed then? And wait for the Tsar to like us again? He changed his mind before I got halfway to Vestrana. Darned temperamental man. My apologies, Miss Camhurst. Lord Hilford waved one hand dismissing the Tsar. No, I found a new location. Stroke of luck, actually. A Chiaveran colleague of mine put me in touch with a Vestrani fellow called Gendrick Gretelkin, who went to university in Trink Lirans. Gretelkin has invited us to come to his village. Doesn't his boyar mind? Jacob asked. Lord Hilford shook his head. Not at all. Not all of them swear off contact with foreigners every time the Tsar gets up on the wrong side of the bed. And Gretelkin, a Rezesh, sort of a local agent for the boyar. He can settle things for us, but we'll have time enough to talk about this later. It's late in the day. I should look into finding a hotel. We pressed him to stay, and he acquiesced. I summoned servants to get him situated in a guest room and told the cook to plan for one extra at dinner. That was the first of several dinners Maxwell Oscott took at our house during the months we spent preparing for the Vestrani expedition. Whether he dined at our house or we at his, we talked of little else, and the Earl made good on his promise, or perhaps threat, to pick my brain about my readings. Initially, I tried to gloss over details, downplaying my interest into something a little more acceptable, but he had a knack for getting people to talk, and in truth, a perceptive reader may have noticed I have a difficult time resisting the chance to discuss my passions. The incident with the wolf drake I successfully kept to myself, but before the 5 before the first night was out, Lord Hilford knew about both my childhood interest and Sir Richard Edgeworth's work and my recent endeavors on the great sparkling inquiry. We spoke he spoke approvingly of my anatomical drawings and showed particular engagement with my notion that sparklings were not insects but diminutive wyvern cousins. We argued the point with great enthusiasm through the following months. I did not get on so well with Thomas Wilker, Lord Hilford's assistant and protege. To be honest, we rather scorned each other. Mr. Wilker tried very hard, but my imperfect success. Mr. Wilker tried very hard, but with imperfect success, to hide the nitty account of his birth. He was the son of a quarryman who used to supply Lord Hilford with fossils of strange animals, and I thought him a bit of a tuft hunter, eager to attach himself to a man who could help him climb into society. For his own part, he did not think much of my scant learning, and clearly only forbore to complain out of deference to his patron's decision. Fortunately, he and I were rarely in each other's company, as our spheres of preparation for the expedition were entirely separate. Here we go. Mr. Wilker and Lord Hilford undertook the work of planning the expedition itself, arranging transportation, lodging, scientific equipment, and permissions from a variety of foreign officials. To me fell the duty of renting out our pastureway house, stabling our horses, and arranging references for the servants who would not stay on. Jacob's task was a sobering one. He set his business affairs in order, which included meeting with his solicitor to make certain his will was prepared. The perils we face were unfortunately quite real. By far the least pleasant aspect of our remaining time in Skirland, though, came from the society gossip. Before the news became public, Jacob and I had a sober conversation about what we could expect by way of reaction from acquaintances and strangers alike. I don't particularly care what they say, I admitted to him one afternoon in late fructus as we walked in the garden. I have a chance to go abroad and see dragons. I do not think anything they say could steal that happiness from me. Jacob sighed. Isabella, my dear, I am sure it feels that way now when you are to go see dragons, but do remember that we will be returning to Skirland when the expedition is done. If you snub society ladies now, you will have to face them again later. Perhaps I could bring back a dragon to frighten them with. Just a small one, nothing extravagant. Lord Hilford has caught them before. Isabella. I laughed and twirled a few steps down the path, arms wide in the sunlight. Of course I'm not serious, dear. Where would we keep a dragon? It's my sparkling shed. It would make a dreadful mess and undo all my careful work. Despite himself, Jacob laughed. You're like a little girl who's been told for the first time that she may have a pony. Ponies? I dismissed these with a snort. Could ponies fly or breathe particles of ice upon those who vex them? I think not. Ponies indeed. Perhaps I shall tell the society gossips that you have become deranged, Jacob mused, and that I am installing you in a sanitarium for your own safety. I'm sure they would believe that. Tell them I am deranged. Tell them I am dead. Tell them I have run off to be a dancing girl in Chiavora. I don't care. Jacob paused to straighten a late rose I had bent in my exuberant passing. We have not been married for so long. Perhaps I can pass it off as an overly affectionate attachment to you, that I still cannot bear for you to be parted from my side. He paused for reflection, twirling between his fingers a blossom that had come off in his hand, it would not be far from the truth. I came back to his side and planted a kiss on his cheek. No, I have it. I will put it about, and I will not let you go because I do not trust you to be faithful away from me. Who would entice my eye to stray? There's a death of there's a dearth. Sorry, a dearth of Chiavoran dancing girls in Vestrana. Then say I'm to keep you civilized. You needn't mention the drawings and such like as at all. Say that in addition to being gap-toothed, pockmarked, and weak-chinned, the Vestrani peasant girls haven't the slightest idea how to keep a gentleman in the style of which he's accustomed. Sorry. I will be there to make certain they polish your shoes and don't brew tea out of your tobacco. What a pity it is that you haven't shown any interest in charity work before now. You might be going to reach them their letters or campaign for better work conditions. Only 30 only 30 sheep per shepherdess any more is quite inhumane. I pray you pardon me a moment of sentimentality when I say that I adore my husband's laugh, light and melodious. It was all the better when I startled it out of him, and this may go some way to explaining why I so often tried to do so. Partly that was my own nature, of course, but who could fault me for indulging it when I loved its reward so much? Okay. Jacob set his hands on my wrist and spun me in the center of the path so that my skirt swung out behind me and damaged the roses still further. Civilization it shall be. Do try to keep quiet about the dragons, my dear. Talk to Miss Oscott of them if you must, but allow me the public pretense that we are being more well behaved. I took a special care to maintain that pretense with my family, even with Andrew, who was only half joking when he asked whether Lord Hilford would notice if he clubbed Mr. Wilker over the head and took his place. Papa, I later learned, suspected much of the truth, but for Mamma's sake we did not speak of it. She was concerned enough for my safety. Having done so little traveling in my life, I imagined our luggage for the trip would be akin to that which I packed when Mamma and I went to Falchester for the first season, with fewer evening gowns and more in the way of practical wear. Foreign travel, for those who may not know, more closely resembles moving house. In addition to clothing, scientific equipment, and the materials for my sketches, we brought with us various accoutrements of our daily lives, and we hoped would make our lives abroad much more comfortable. Saddles, lamps, writing desks, and one armchair which Lord Hilford apparently took with him wherever he went. I overheard him advising Jacob to bring with him a good supply of coffee, as it can't be got for love or money in Vestrana, and the stuff they drink would be more suited for scouring rust from horse tack. Ew. We journeyed together down to the coast of Sensmouth, myself and Jacob, Lord Hilsford and Mr. Wilker, and a variety of friends and relations, including Andrew. I had never been to the port city before, and much entertained my companions by exclaiming over all the new sights, of which the grandest by far was certainly the steamship, the Magnolia. It was a measure of Lord Hilford's wealth that we would travel in such style. When I was born, everyone assumed steam engines would be ubiquitous in the future, but that was before the iron deposits in Skirland were found to be all but exhausted. Coal we still had in abundance, but to build the machines ourselves we had to engage in expensive trade with other lands, or often as not tried to colonize them, which was the origin of our misadventures in Ariga and elsewhere. To travel a steamship was, in those days, still a rare and wondrous thing. Rare and wondrous, and new enough that it was quite prone to trouble. The Magnolia carried sails for use if the engines should fail us, just as ancient ships sometimes carried oars. Mr. Wilker said he had what I saw as a regretful habit of showing off his learning, in case the wind should fail. We had best hope the engine and wind didn't fail together, Jacob said. I don't see oars anywhere. Our route would take us around the Cape of Dave Rest and through the Sea of Al-Sukir to the port of Trinque Lirans in Chiavora, from which we would go north into the Vestrani highlands. Andrew came on board to help settle me in the cabin. I would share with Jacob, which lay in the forward part of the ship, along the starboard side. I hope you aren't prone to seasickness, he said, peering out the porthole. That was the room's only source of natural light. How would I know whether I am or not? I replied, hanging a few of my dresses in the tiny wardrobe. I've never been to sea before. Andrew had gone to Thiessen last year as a reward for completing university at last. I advise not being seasick if you can avoid it. Not a pleasant experience. Well, he continued to potter about the small room, peering into the ingenious little cabinets with which its design had supplied it. I sank into one of the two narrow beds when at length Andrew noticed me sitting there. When he noticed the expression on my face, he became awkward. Back up, old girl. Seasickness isn't that bad. I took a steadying breath, not certain whether it was tears or a hysterical laugh I was trying to hold back. Oh, it isn't that. A touch of nerves, nothing more, and a realization that I will not see anything familiar for some time. Not my house, not my family, nor Skirland itself. He patted my shoulder. You have Camhurst. Oh, you'll have Camhurst, won't you? Surely that counts for something. I'm sure he'll take care of you. How could I have explained it to him? My fear was not that I would not be taken care of. It was that I would need to be. That my inexperience, my provincial upbringing would render me little more than a child who had somehow convinced her parents to bring her along on to an event she would not enjoy in the slightest. Oh yes, I believed I would enjoy dragons, but in between me and the great beasts. Sorry. I lost my train of thought. But in between me and the great beasts lay a tremendous number of things, unknown and therefore frightening. This worry may sound ludicrous to those who know the latest parts of my life's story, but there on the steamship at the tender age of 19, it was terrifying, though a terrifying thought indeed. Despite that terror, I took Andrew's hand in my own and squeezed it, making myself smile at him. I'm sure, and just thinking of the stories I will have to tell when I return. We made a grand sight that sunset, steaming our way out of the harbor at a slow but deliberate pace. Andrew and various other well-wishers stood on the jetty that thrust out into the sea, from which they waved farewell. I waved in response until we drew far enough away that we retired back into Sinsmouth, vanishing among the houses there. The houses. Then I stood on the deck for some time more, watching Skirland dwindle steadily behind us. Around me the crew conducted their duties, and I tried to stay out of their way until the light was quite dim and Jacob came to take me below. Part 2. Let me see here. We still have some time. Okay. Part 2. In which the expedition arrives in Vestrani, but faces difficulty in commencing its work. Okay. 7, or Chapter 7, rather. The Journey to Vestrani, my first wild dragon, arrival in Drustanev, a chance to depart. Although it is hard to find now, I encourage any youngsters reading this, by which I mean anyone under the age of 40, to seek out a copy of my first publication, A Journey to the Mountains of Vestrani. Not for reasons of quality, it's an insipid little thing, produced because at the time travel writing was considered a suitable genre for young ladies' pens. But that book, which contains a much fuller account of our travels from Skirlin to Vestrani, is a window into a time all but forgotten now in this age of railways, fast ships, and Kalingers. You cannot conceive, if you are young, the slowness and difficulty of travel back then, nor, I imagine, do you want to. This modern speed has brought many improvements for commerce, diplomacy, and learning, and more, and yet there is a part of me that misses the old way. Call it an old woman's nostalgia if you like, but our journey to Vestrani served us a useful transition, a separation from the young woman I had been in Skirland, and a preparation for the woman I would be on the expedition. Had it been possible for me to arrive quickly in Vestrani, I think I would not have been ready when I did so. I believed myself to be ready then. Now, with the hindsight brought by greater age, I see myself for the naive and inexperienced young woman I was. We all begin in such a manner, though there is no quick route to experience. For our landing in Trinc Lorenz, we were upriver to San Verio, where we attached ourselves to a trio of carters taking supplies across the nearby border into Vestrana. For a fee, they packed their wagons high with our belongings, and so we began our climb into the mountains. It was our first real taste of hardship, though, by the standards of such a word. My sufferings were mild indeed. The village we aimed for was very isolated, even for Vestrani. The carters only made the journey because it was more convenient for the local boyar to be supplied from San Verio than anywhere else. Once or twice we managed beds in a farmhouse, but more often than not we slept in tents on folded cots that kept us off the ground. We had nothing else to recommend them. So determined was I not to complain that I did not let myself think of the day when this stage would end. It therefore came as a shock to me one morning when Lord Hilford said, we should make it there today. If this weather holds. Blinking in the early sunlight, I said, make it where? He smiled at me. The village of Drustanev, our destination, Mrs. Camhurst. After so much time on the sea and the road, I could hardly believe we would be stopping at last. We loaded ourselves onto the wagon in a hurry and set out with more energy than usual. I studied the landscape about me with a newly curious eye. Okay, we still have time. It was uneven terrain, valleys of spruce and fir, alternating with gentle slopes of grass, and windswept ridges of limestone and lichen. Even with the cloudless sky, the air was no more than pleasantly warm. I wondered how far we had risen from the coast. High above, I saw a bird floating lazily on the wind. With no point of reference, I could not be sure how large it was, but I rather thought it must be some breed of eagle. Certainly it was not a dragon, though I kept my eyes eagerly open for one. The weather held fine for most of the morning, but as the afternoon drew on, clouds grew on the mountaintops and rolled in our direction. One of the carters shot at a wolf that was following us too closely, scaring it off. He and his fellows held a brief conversation in the impenetrable dialect of their native region, not the more refined Chianvaran, Chiavaran the rest of us knew, and decided to press on. They judged this a bad area to camp in, even if it meant a wedding before we arrived in Drustanev. As the wind picked up, okay, wait a minute, let me see if we've got time. We do. As the wind picked up, I tied my bonnet more firmly to my head. The clouds seemed very low. I had a book out, which I had been attempting to read, and for a time I tried to go on doing so, bracing my forehead along the edges of the pages to keep them from flapping about. From the wagon bench at my side, though, Jacob nudged me and said, "You might want to put that away. I fear it will rain soon." I sighed, but he was right. Closing the book, I turned in my seat and reached over the back of the wagon bench to stow it in a pack that would all too soon prove whether it was waterproof as advertised or not. Okay, now we have to stop. We will be picking this up at a later date. We have been reading from A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent, and this is a book by Marie Brennan. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.